no self-esteem. I actually had no coordination. My physical ability was down to zilch. And I was walking by the school that was hanging out and they were doing all kinds of martial arts. And I was sitting there for hours and I would watch them practice. Go, I want to do that, but I had no money. So I found out there was a Taekwondo program that I could go to, and I could actually wash dishes, wash floors, and that was my payment. So I would actually do that. Within 2 months of training, I was able to get my self-esteem back. And for somehow, I don't even have to do anything, but people recognize that something about me has changed. So I began training, and that became my lifelong journey and dream to get where I need to go. So, but after teaching many kids and doing my degree in psychology, one day I was running a kind of a group. My teacher, the way he used to do it, he used to put us all together at the end of the class and we talk philosophy. We talk about not just martial arts, but philosophical aspect. And so I took that into my practice, and one day, when I was doing a presentation to a dance group, they were showing their stuff, I was showing my stuff. It was like, how can you keep the kids so still? It's amazing. I can't do that. And I'm thinking, wow, I can do this with clinical kids. I can actually do what I do with them, and I'll succeed doing so. So I thought about how I would do this. When I was designing the program, I looked at every aspect of martial arts. So how do we get into martial arts? How do the kids, what do they see? Generally, they see through the movies. It's an aggressive aspect. So their friends are there, so they want to be, oh, come on in, do martial arts. That's how I kind of got into it that way. They need a sporting activity. Parents want us to practice being bullied constantly. We want to improve our courage. That's how we initially get into martial arts. And the movie aspect, you walk around and show the movie stars and bring oh, this is great, this is movie star. So we see all these incredible movements that we don't see anywhere else. So why do we stay in martial arts? How many of you know kids quit? What are the 2 fastest belts that people quit at? Anybody know statistically? No. That's one, and the other one is? Brown, right next to black. These are 2 most, so the kids don't sustain themselves in martial arts. One, because they realize it's not movies, it's actually hard work. You go, wait a minute, I have to practice this. This is not easy. So yellow belt comes around and all of a sudden the training becomes harder. Oh, I don't want to do this kind of stuff. Now when you get to then the training changes when you get to black, brown to black, or whatever the next rank would be. And a lot of people kids quit there, or people quit there because the training becomes even more intense. It's dedication about. So these are 2 major reasons why we quit. Why do we stay? One, it's a camaraderie. The school becomes a way to be in a place. You can look at even at this seminar how much camaraderie there is. We find skills that are very useful, which this is what happened to me. I found I can actually do something that I couldn't do before, like the competitive edge, competition. So people stay the competition aspect of that. We find the things that were not doing before, and we like our teacher. So I'll talk a little bit about why that's important, psychologically speaking, but Mr. Miyagi. We like Karate Kid not for Daniel's son, but for Mr. Miyagi, because of that association of a teacher and a student. We like Cobra Kai because of the teachers that are there. So that's an important aspect in our psychology when we deal with somebody there. If you have a terrible teacher, they don't stay. If you have a good teacher who you associate with, they become almost like a father figure to you. So that's an important factor. And that changes. Huh? Or a mother figure. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. No, you're absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. We're going back to Freud on that one. But that's fine. So, okay. Who are our practitioners? Kids. Competitive kids who are socially awkward, kids who are angry, we need to get rid of aggression, kids with mental health issues. Now, when somebody comes to martial arts school, most teachers are not clinicians, right? Most teachers are martial artists. So they don't know how to deal with all these things, but who actually goes there? Well, those who go there are actually kids with serious problems in life. And kid being bullied comes in, low self-esteem, inability to do anything. So these are the kids that stay there. Now, lately, and if you notice, if you teach any martial arts schools, lately you're gonna notice a lot more kids with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. This is a disorder that's almost, let's call it the millennium disorder. Because in the past, we didn't think about PTSD. Now, it is rampant. So because of several wars, because of how we redefine what PTSD is, now we will look at it more traumatic. It could be weather related, it could be people related, it could be any accident related, it could be abuse related. All of these are kids coming in with those issues. So most people don't even focus or even think about those things at a time. Oh, you want to practice? Go ahead and practice. None of a sudden you put a kid against another kid who is bigger or something triggered, and the PTSD reaction comes in, and all of a sudden you have a kid who just can't even move. So that's a mental health issue. So with perception in the West. So when I was writing my book, by the way, if you're interested, I have a few books that I wrote. This is the therapeutic martial arts, the program itself, the whole process, and then I also have the system that I train. Sami Chulo. I'll tell you a little bit about that. Least important at the moment, this is more important. So in the book, what I do, I differentiate between the Eastern philosophy and the Western philosophy. It's two different kind of philosophies. One, in the Western, of course, movies, great training, it's fighting, it's aggression, it's awesome stuff like that. So, Hollywoodized, commercialized, competitions, trophies. That's the Western philosophy or the mindset when the martial arts came to the United States or initially to Europe and so and so. Oh, sorry. What happened? Somehow we lost it. We're there. Go.
Dr. Redmond?
Yes.
On that topic, it's also in reverse now, where the Asian countries have the sport competitions, they've kind of adopted some of our ways. China.
Actually, let me get to the point.
Yeah,
It's very correct. So when we talk about the Eastern perspective, so this is a little bit different. In the Western perspective, we look for the end of the means. So we look not at the process, but at the product. What do we get with competition? What do we get with going to school? We want to get something. Although it's not wrong, it's just different. Eastern philosophy, because it is millenniums, several millenniums, has been developing over time. So we're talking about, they focus on a process. The training is more important than the actual prize itself. If you remember, Chikara who came up with the whole belt system. Before belt system, there was no belt system. You don't get a belt. So that became, because he was paramilitary, university teacher, so he kind of changed it more into accomplishments, more Western kind of thinking. But before that, in fact, when I trained, my teacher had an old philosophy of a belt. We don't have belts, we have ranks, but we have two belts, white and black. Why that? Is because you wear a white belt until the end. In the old philosophy, that held your uniform, but when it became dark, black and dirty, that's your black belt. And if you're a master, well, if you have a black belt, then it begins to like lose color and becomes white. You're not a master. That's the concept of original martial arts. In fact, my teacher gave me his belt when I got my black belt. It's very gray. It's like down to almost white, which is great because it shows training. I'm wearing this mostly for all this stuff. But the process is more important. Relation between bodies as complementary forces to remote flow, continuity, change. Attainment of higher being. Historically, Easterners do not focus on fighting or kata. They focus on a whole, complete system of how it works in the mental state, in the social aspect, in every aspect there is.
No, I'm just saying, like, it's
That's basically what I just described.
Yeah, it's nice. It sounds like a good idea.
So, martial several millennia ago, it is profoundly influenced by religion, philosophy, and culture. Now, that begins to play out in a couple of aspects. When you're bridging the two, you're bridging both Eastern and Western ideas. And believe it or not, they're changing into us, we're changing into them. Little, it's kind of like beginning mishmash, which is kind of great, because in the 50s, the whole East and West came together. If you remember the Karate Kid Part 2, when he goes to Japan, and then he goes to like, what is all this place? What happened to all the traditional? Well, that's over here. We're all modernizing over here. We're moving into Americanized mindset. So martial arts became more popular in the West countries. Easterners became more competitive, as you mentioned, in that sense. The Westerners became more philosophical. So we're kind of bridging that between back and forth. The systems have combined. It's no longer traditional Kempo. It's no longer traditional Shotokan or traditional Wing Chun. It's now combined. In fact, the system that I trained originally was a combination between Chuan Fa, which is the Kempo, the Chinese Kempo, the Shaolin Chinese Kempo, Judo, which is a Japanese system, Tai Chi was a Chinese system, and then we added Taekwondo, Shotokan. We kind of became a hybrid system, so to speak. We began to combine the aspects of all kinds of martial arts and philosophies, both Chinese, Japanese, and the Westerners. It is not necessarily a bad thing. It is what it is. I mean, we live here in the United States, and we're still practicing the older type of tradition. So we kind of have to combine the two. Okay. Oh, sorry. Backwards. So let me explain a bit why martial arts, certain constants that we see across the world, why it's such a camaraderie and brotherhood across the world. There are certain things that we do no matter what. If you practice Taekwondo in the United States and you go to England, you're gonna find almost identical there as here or in Korea. Right now I'm talking to the United Nations, UNESCO. We have a whole setup for martial arts. It's amazing, but there is very similar to ours. It's a constant. You walk into a dojo, whether it's a dojo in Japanese, Chinese, or Korean, or American, it's still a dojo environment. So, how many of you are religious with the church synagogue? Okay, when you walk into a church, is it different? Is it a particular kind of feeling and environment? Well, it is. Dojo is an environment, just like a place of worship or something else. There's a master teacher or somebody who leads and associating to. Think of it as a father figure, mother figure, or a preacher that does the same thing. There's a practice, there's formation of violent screams, breathing, all of these in constants. Whether you do soft kia or a hard kia, doesn't matter. It's still kia. You're still promoting energy. And there is roles, discipline, bounds, ceremonies, rank, all of that is part of martial arts culture. We live this culture. We wear gis as a culture. If you think about it, it's a little ridiculous because it's a gi. Anywhere else, but martial arts, if you walk down the street and something, it's kind of strange. But you walk into a martial arts dojo, that's your gi. So psychologically, it uniforms us. Imagine this: a kid who comes in who's got no control over anything. You walk into a dojo, you line him up and give him a gi. Now he's part of a bigger whole. Now he's standing there not just by himself among bullies or school. Now he's standing among a group of people who can associate and identify with. That is an important factor when it comes to the mindset of going in. So automatically you take away the aggression. You take away in fact, if some of your dojos may have this, when you walk in here, you walk in with respect. You leave your attitude outside. How many of you have that in your schools? Right? So you assume that is one of the aspects that you have to do as you walk into the dojo. So these are the concepts. Okay, so what are the therapeutic aspects of martial arts? We don't think about these things, but I've been doing a lot of research in this area. This was my original dissertation, and then I actually done a lot of research in all different aspects of the martial arts. So this is going to go with each one of them. So you have a psychophysiological aspect, physiology. We talked about chiropractic. We talked about neurology. We talked about this. Let's say even simple stuff: speed of a kick, punch. That's physiology. Breaking a board. That's physics. So psychophysiological, neuropsychological. I'll talk a little bit about it in a future. Brainwave studies about what kind of brainwave changes that people have upon both involving in breaking a board, so that's neuropsychological. Psychological, clinical, and therapeutic. Okay, so I'm gonna go briefly. I don't want to like kind of bore you because it's a lot of research stuff. So I'm gonna briefly into a little bit of aspect of each one of them, and then I'll tell you how the program works. So these are the individuals that came up with this psychophysiological aspect, the relationship between increased task performance and martial arts training. They showed high increase in that. The participation in tournaments, for example, enhanced physical conditioning, task performance, and psychophysiological abilities. So when you train for a competition, by the way, if you're just training martial arts by itself, it's great, right? But remember how you say, okay, we have a competition coming up. We're gonna now train to compete. Out of a sudden, they have a whole different kind of training system within the kids or adolescents or even anywhere. And then you say, okay, so we're gonna do a demo. Now you're practicing for a demo. So physiologically, you're going over techniques and you're training your body to do so. Well, that's psychophysiological aspects of that. So, neuropsychological. Reports greater alpha brain activity when upon common martial arts staff or breaking a board. They actually measured activity, EEG-wise, right before and during breaking of a board. So the study showed that when a person about to break a board, actually brain waves decrease. They go down to an alpha level and theta, almost theta level. If you're not familiar with brain waves, the beta is what we function, alpha is when you're relaxing and going into deeper state, theta when you're almost falling asleep, and delta when you're asleep. So when you're concentrating and breaking that board, you're dropping the alpha level really low. Actually, alpha increases and everything else drops low. When you're breaking the board, there's a burst of beta wave, incredible response. So knowing that aspect is really important. And Trudeau, Trudeau is kind of an interesting study I'll mention a few times. She took children and adolescents who were paraplegic, who were not able to move at all, made them all the way down to the black belts. She had a whole system in doing so. And she did a lot of neuropsychological studies in that sense. The neurology improved, the brainwave activity improved, the body motions improved, just by training martial arts. And she was not a clinician, she just did a study in that aspect. So, psychological. Okay, so we talk a lot about this among us, but we really don't focus on this. So there's an actual study been going back from 1984 and a little bit before that as well. These are like major studies that were completed along the way. There are new ones, in fact, right now, and if you go on my website, I feature those new studies that come up. So the mental discipline, concentration, stress management, self-control, self-awareness, decrease of regret. All of these were found to improve tremendously when it comes to martial arts training. And they also found focus and self-esteem. So as I mentioned before, let's say you take a kid who cannot be socially, or who is socially awkward, who cannot be among other kids because of body size, because of inability, because of disability. Right now I have an autistic child who he has awkward movements and he's really, kids laughing at him all the time. Now you take him into this environment and I teach him martial arts, and all of a sudden his body movement change and his self-esteem increases tremendously. This kid that I have right now, and I'll tell you how I do this in my program, and all of a sudden the kid is like, Mom, like, oh my God, the kid is doing change, and it's an autistic kid. So that is a psychological aspect. Now, clinical aspect. This is what I do. So clinical therapeutic aspects of application martial arts and therapy. Use martial arts either to conceptually or in actuality. So an interesting study about the Karate Kid movie. They actually did not even teach martial arts. They just they took a child who had behavioral problems in school and otherwise, and they used the concept of the movie in therapy, just that alone. And they had like 4 sessions running. When they found that by using martial arts concepts alone, changed the child's behavior in school and with peers and everything else. So you think, but you're not even training martial arts. Well, a lot of times you don't, but if you remember we talked about Mr. Miyagi and the concept of teacher, a student, that alone changed the whole concept of what the kid's behavior. So anger and aggression, what am I focusing? So let me ask you a question. What is the biggest taboo in the world today? Does anybody know? Taboo in general. I get people say sex. No. Aggression. We don't want to talk about this. we deal with this, but we don't want to talk about this. So so I get moms like, how do I deal with this kid? My kid is all aggressive. He's fighting with at school. He's fighting with me. So aggression, they don't know how to deal with it. So that becomes an important. So addressing it and the risk factor about it. Here's something really important. People do not differentiate. Let's say a kid comes in, even at home. Mom says the kid is aggressive. So I want to differentiate. Are they angry or they're aggressive? And what people don't understand a lot of times is aggression is a behavior. Anger is a feeling. How many of you get angry? Thank you. How many of you get aggressive? Sometimes, right? But so to understand this factor, one is happens just because something happened to you. The other one is a choice. The choice part you can deal with. The feelings, you can manage it. You can't stop the feeling. If I call you a bad name, you're gonna go, I'm angry. But it's your choice to respond to me or to do something with it. That's the interesting aspect that people don't think about that. Okay, fight-flight syndrome. That's an interesting concept. What do you know about, again, this is for your participation. What do you know about fight-flight?
Unfortunately, too many people are living in that state all the time, they don't even know it.
What is fight-flight?
Well, there's a heightened state of adrenaline and mental state, and where they're ready to fight, they're ready to go. It could be over a cup of coffee.
Uh-huh. I'm sorry? Adrenaline surge.
Activation of the limbic system, frontal lobe without authentic brain that does not allow person to develop distance from thought and reaction. So we
Okay.
have
Let me summarize because people may not be clinically minded. So let me summarize what you were saying. All of you saying is correct, except for a couple of things. So what happens in your brain? You have two systems. You have sympathetic and parasympathetic system. The limbic system is one of them. So what it does is surges all kinds of hormones and chemicals in your brain, and your body begins to either engage or disengage. Okay? You either freeze or you release. So with that, there's a lot of changes in perception. So so let me tell you about this. So believe it or not, there's an opportunity here because I have the long version of a short. It's supposed to be yesterday's short version, but I'll tell you a little bit about it. I don't want to bore you too much, but it's important. So when you feel a threat coming to you, the first reaction is what? Now physiologically, muscle tension, your stomach changes, you might have like a thing in here, in your throat, your brain start to go fast, your thinking go fast, you have an increase of perception, and that's psychological upon threat or anxiety provoking situation, right? So I developed a model which is basically for clinical use, but it's in my book if you want to read it. It's really kind of extended model. I designed TxMA, threat aggression management. And so what it is this. So I have 4 stages of this. The first stage, by the way, they don't happen like 1, 2, 3. Some of them happen simultaneously. So the first stage is what you have innately comes. So you have your innate responses, learned responses. Something happened a long, long time ago when you were a child and as you go along. So those are within you. The second stage is a processing stage. So once the information hits and all those emotions is, what do you do? What do you engage in it? Do you start processing as a threat or a fear or not? And believe it or not, there's a time lag. The third stage is the decision stage. Do I engage or do I disengage? The fourth stage is the action stage where you actually go on and you make that choice. So how many of you faced ever with a threat in the past? Okay. What did you do? What did you do? Confusion, stuck. How many of you, after learning martial arts for years, went, I don't know what I'm doing? Because that happens a lot. You train, and now you're faced with the real threat. You go, about what 80% of your martial arts went out the window. What do? You get stuck. How many of you responded? And was it an automatic response?
It was automatic. I didn't. I moved without thinking.
Right. So that's a misperception. He said I moved without thinking was a response. Your reflex engaged. Okay. So let me give you a situation that I was in a little while ago, and how this actually works in a more profound way. So as I was driving, I was with my son, and I pulled up and I made a turn, and there was a guy that I didn't see was in a moped, and he didn't have a lights on. So he passed by, and he literally came right next to me, and I said, "Oh, I apologize," and he's saying, starts screaming at me, "I'm gonna bust your window. What are you doing?" Now, the first thing that happened is all of that, right? So I looked at my son, and he's looking at me like, "What are you gonna do?" My decision was automatically not to respond. Now I could have, so I look in the mirror and I see there's another guy on a motorcycle. So he's in a moped, there's a guy on a motorcycle. I'm thinking, okay, now I'm processing. I'm gonna open the door, push this guy off the bike, turn around, throw a kick over there, and he's gonna all fall off the bike. Hey, I'm a winner. But then I'm looking at my son and he's scared. Not that son, that's my other son. Well, not that he's scared, but he's kind of like confused. So now my third stage engaged, and my response was internally the decision to go, "Thank you, I'm sorry, goodbye," and I left. So my response was not to engage, but there was a lag time, choice-wise, in order to do that. Now, if you do read my book, I'll go into this discussion about how that kind of works in your mind, and you can train that. So when I design the program on therapeutic martial arts, I'm training second and third stage. I'm training all the things you need to do in order not to engage or make a decision to have to engage. Now, believe it or not, if the issue was safety of my child, then I would have been engaging. So the decision would have committed differently in my mind. My mind would have made that other choice to do so. So that's something we can teach to make choices for our students who have mental health issues. Come on. Well, tell me a bit about the program itself. So what exactly is it therapeutic martial arts? I've been doing therapy and I've been involved in psychology for over 35 years. I've been in almost every aspect of psychology you think about, I've already done it. I worked in the juvenile detention system. Now I work with I also work with prisoners. I work now with military personnel who have PTSD. So I do a lot of that work. So generally, there's a traditional way of approaching the therapy. And if you ever been to therapy, and I'm not going to ask who did what, it's confidential. But if you've been to therapy, you know it's conversation, it's talking, it's engaging. Not everybody can do that, especially children. You can't sit a child down and start talking about, your mother, father, or, they won't talk. I have one kid who took about 6 months to trust me. This kid been through all kinds of abuse. So by the time they got to me, why should I tell you stuff like that? What the hell? Who are you? I've been through about 5 other psychologists. None of them did anything for me. So he couldn't even verbalize the things that he needed to verbalize. So I needed to do something different. Now I said, hey, by the way, I have a therapeutic martial arts program. Would you like to join? Now this kid is aggressive, that you could not believe. There were 2 brothers. A son of a military, and abused by the mother, severely beaten and taken away from her. So now the father is not the greatest thing in the world, so the kids are in trouble, so they won't trust anybody. So I need to do something different. Now, we've got formation, we do the whole thing, and now, out of a sudden, one kid says, I have something to say. My mom beat me when I was a kid, and all the kids went, really? Now we got communication going, okay? So that's what I apply non-traditional techniques. So what is that? It would be therapeutic shots invites a manifest approach in creating new skills on deeper level. In reference to threat aggression modulation model, which I just talked to you a little bit about it. It targets processing and decision stage by providing a variety of new coping strategies, functional psychological capacity, and increased awareness. As a result of response stage, the affected participants gain the increased range of alternate behaviors. rather than responding or withdrawing, now they have a choice of what they can do. What is the goal? Is to create an environment where participants can experience psychological growth and utilize the structure, techniques, of martial art therapy. I use different approaches. So, how many of you are familiar with psychology in general? Okay, you know about behaviorism, right? Behavior. You know about positive reinforcement. You know about cognitive behavioral cognition. You know about dynamical work. How many of you are familiar with Gestalt? A few people. Okay, real quickly, Gestalt means completion. So what Gestalt does, it uses different ways to bring out awareness psychologically, physically, emotionally, into the current state. When you become aware of what you're doing, out of a sudden you can gain that ability to engage or disengage and do other things as well. So I use those things. These are several of those. And by the way, meditation. So I've done some studies on meditation. It's pretty amazing. Right now, there's a lot of research going on about meditation in general. So, clinical application. Almost every aspect of martial arts become metaphor and self-expression. Movement and techniques represent real life circumstances. The physical communication metaphorically signs and it signifies internal states and is applied to express deep psychological issues. I'll talk about in a few minutes exactly how that works. Martial arts techniques and other components, self-esteem, sparring, kata, self-defense, sparring, kata, allows participants to express internal conflicts. TxMA, which is the therapeutic martial arts, uses physical and psychological communication therapeutic mechanisms. So how do you apply? Okay, even if you walk into a dojo, as I said before, the rituals, the formation, energy focus,